And there is actually a very, very serious concern that I may become sober. So we're, forestall that.
That's medicine.
Exactly. It's strictly medicinal purposes for my rheumatism. And this is proper, Wisconsin snow. Okay. All right, this is going to be my co-host, Desi. All right. Hi, YouTube. Okay, I'm Uncle Kage, blah, blah, blah. You know that shit. Lots of you know that I am a convention chairman, a scientist, and very, very entertaining drunkard. That's what I do. I also write. I have published a number of stories professionally. Incidentally, how many folks have seen this presentation before? Good, because if you don't raise your hands, I'd say, fuck it, I'm going to go see Three-Headed Monster. Okay. I write. I like to write. I've been writing a number of years. In 1990, some number of years ago, I got an email from Mercedes Lackey. She's actually a friend of mine. We've known each other many, many years. When I lived in Arkansas, I used to go and visit her and her husband in Oklahoma. And we hung out. And she sent me an email saying, I'm putting together an anthology of stories, science fiction stories, on the theme of birds of prey. I want you to write a story for me. I know that you know birds, and I know you know how to write. And I said, I can't do it. You mean like write an actual story that people are going to read? And she said, sure, we'll do it. I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. I got this. Okay, when's the deadline? She said, end of the month. Ah! So I threw together this story. This is in the ancient days before we had FTP even. We're talking way back then. The day before the end of the month, I took my printed out story and I put it into a FedEx envelope and I sent it to her overnight express to arrive on the day of the deadline. And I waited and I heard nothing back. And about a year passed. I thought, oh. So I sent her a note saying, so, what about it? She said, oh, it was great. Doesn't need anything. I'd like to publish it as is. I said, okay, but it's been a year. She said, oh, none of the other authors got their submissions in. So that was my first lesson. Deadlines to professionals mean shit. That book is called Flights of Fantasy. That's Doll Books. I've also been published by Fur Planet, The Furry Future, Gods with Fur. Doll also published Elemental Magic. Fuck it, okay, I write shit. All right, there, that's all you need to know. And it's been published and people read it. So, I write. And because I write, I read. Can't do one without the other. And I like to think I know a little bit about writing. So what this is called, effective writing. In case you didn't look at the schedule and you thought this was Fox and Peppers. It's not. And, well, this is good shit. Anyway. Typically, I prefer to do this talk sober. Oh well. Anyway. Anybody can write a story. There's nothing to it. You vomit a bunch of words out onto the page, blam, you're done. But will anybody want to read it? When I say effective writing, what do I mean by that? I mean a story that will engage your reader. A story that will cause your reader to be drawn into it. That's the difference between writing and effective writing. I'm hardly an expert. I am not an educator by trade, but by nature. So what I have here is a bunch of notes, which you can't read because they're upside down. And I'm going to give you as basically a primer. Nothing is on this piece of paper that your high school English teacher hasn't already taught you. I'm here to tell you, your high school English teacher was not full of shit, and all those stupid assignments, they were effective. Get it? Effective. All right. Let's talk about the basic parts of a story. A story has basically a beginning, a middle, and an end. Any questions? Thank you very much. We're done. Now, there's a fourth part. A beginning, a middle, a climax, and an end. We call this the story arc. You've always heard that expression, the story arc. It takes the same form. A rising, building like a roller coaster, that anticipation climbing up to the top with the clack, clack, clack as the tension builds. The climax, that point there. And then, what they call in French, the denouement. And in English, we call it the denouement because it's a great word, and why make up a new word when you already have a cool one? Let's take a step back, then. We're going to take a step back. I don't know how much room to take a step back. Who here is a furry? Thought so. Thank you very much. If you're going to write a story, it's almost certainly going to be a furry story. Let's examine that. I want to write a furry story because I'm a furry. Okay, I'm going to write a story about Desi. And Desi's a dragon, right? And he works in an accounting firm, and it's a terrible job, and his boss hates him, and his coworkers are cold to him. He has no friends, and he's just totally miserable, and life has no meaning to him, and he's starting to even think of cashing it in. But then he meets Jason. Jason is a fox. He meets Jason the fox. And Desi is enamored with Jason, and it's like, oh my God, there is more to life. It's not all work. It's not all my professional whatever. There is more to life, and I am happy at the end. Nice. Why was Desi a dragon? Why was Jason a fox? What's the point? I ask that of young authors. They send me this stuff. Here's my story, read it. And I say, dude, why the hell was he a fox? I like foxes. You guys. And etc. I'm sorry, this is the 21st century. You folks. You're furries. By definition, you are among the elite of dreamers. You are the most spectacular creators. The most outstanding inventors that humankind has ever known. This is what I love about furry fandom. There is so much untapped potential of dreams in this fandom. You guys got it. You have all of that material in your heads. Do something with it. If your character is going to be a furry, that's got to be an integral part of the story. If it's not, if you can replace the word dragon with the word plumber and have exactly the same story, you've done it wrong. It's what Kyle Gold calls the zipperback story. As in fursuits. It's like all your characters are dressed in fursuits, but they're still human beings. If you have a furry in your story, think for a moment what you can do. You have a canine, an amazing sense of smell, incredible hearing. You have a bird of prey, can see fucking miles away. Is also a dickhead. Trust me, I know birds of prey, they're dickheads, just across the board. Birds of prey are dickheads. Write that down. That's going to be on the test. I have written stories where I have utilized the fact that this person is not a human being. Use those features. Make that part of the story. Like I said, you have a character who's a lion. Because I like lions, there better be a reason for that character to be a lion. And you better have something in the story that uses that character's Lioness. You know what I'm talking about, right? Yes. There's a word that describes that. Yep. Is there a scene that's going to require somebody with excessive speed or excessive strength, or who has claws, or who can roar and intimidate people, or who can sleep 23 hours a day? That's my kind of story. Okay. That's the basic part. You've got the story in your head. Make sure there's a reason for that furry to be in the story. Don't just drop the furry in there. A great writer whose name I cannot remember, and God damn it, I did not research this, once wrote that if there is a word in that story that doesn't point to the climax, it should be taken out. So don't go on for pages and pages about how your character is a wolf without also going into how he can hear the nasty comments that his colleagues make about him. The, very, very hurtful little jokes they make about how he sheds on the furniture. They think that's so funny. They don't realize how sensitive he is to that. How, when he comes in out of the rain, nobody likes to sit next to him. Now let's get into some mechanics. I mentioned the parts of the story. Let's start at the beginning. That's a good place to start. Most of you are young. All of you are young. When I was your age, if you wanted to read a story, you had to purchase this thing. It was called a book. It's kind of like an analog Kindle. It's a bunch of papers stacked together with writing on them. And in order to purchase this so-called book, you had to go to a place that we called a bookstore. And you would go to the bookstore, and you would pick up a book. And you would open it, and you'd read. John was a 6 1/2 foot tall wolf morph with blazing yellow. Next! Goring! That opening to the story, the first words, the first sentence, the first paragraph, is what we call the hook. That's going to make your reader want to continue reading. That's the name of the game. You've got 400 pages to go. If you don't get that person's attention in the first 30 seconds, those 400 pages mean dick. I remember when I was a student, years ago in college, I had a creative writing class. We had to chisel on cuneiform tablets. One of my colleagues, and damn me, to this day I don't remember who it was. We were tasked with coming up with an opening line, a hook. And I heard this one, it was so much better than mine. This person wrote, "To hell," said the Duchess as she lit her cigar. 40 years later, I want to read that damn story. That's, okay, Duchess, lighting a cigar, something's funny here. Using crass language. This is interesting. Throughout history, there have been some openings that have been talked about among academics and non-academics alike. I have some of them here. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. What does that tell you right away? Something is seriously fucked up in this story. You don't know about me without what you read a story called The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. That book was written by a Mr. Mark Twain. He told the truth, mainly. As Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a monstrous insect. True! Nervous? Very dreadfully nervous was I then and am now. But why would you say that I am mad? Call me Ishmael. That one. Herman Melville. Moby Dick, 1848. Those three words have been discussed by academics over hundreds of thousands of gallons of alcohol since that year. Call me Ishmael. Simple, not complicated. Here we have, right away, a character in a book reaching out a literary hand to shake yours, making a connection with you. Hi, call me Ishmael. I have a story to tell. That had never been done before, and it's very hard to really compare it to today. We're going to come back to Herman Melville. I have a lot to say about Herman Melville. Okay, you have your hook. You've got your idea of a story. It's a furry story, because we're all furries, right? And we're going to use the fact that our furry is a furry as an integral part of the story. If my character was not a wolf, the story would not make sense. And I have the hook. I have that introduction. Whether it's the first sentence, the first paragraph, something that's going to make that person reaching back in the 1970s who's buying this book want to purchase your so-called book from you when you paid 95 cents for it. God. Anyway. And I mentioned that everything, as you build that story, has got to point to that climax. Remember the story arc I told about? You have to build up to it. We're going to tell this story. This is the hard part. This is where we come in to the meat and potatoes, which, I'm sorry if you're a vegetarian, we're coming into the tofu and carrot soup. Let's write a story. Your English teacher always said, show, don't tell. And you were sick of hearing that, because that's all the stupid son of a bitch ever said. Show, don't tell. Oh, you earned your $18,000 a year, didn't you? Show, don't tell. What does that mean? It's what we call exposition. If all you do is describe things, you're going to lose your reading. Human beings, by which I mean us, we are very visual creatures. Doing okay? We are very visual creatures. If you need a hair of the dog, let me know.
You did too much vodka last night.
You did it right, cheers. I'll try not to yell too much. We are visual creatures.
Hang on, if you're going to yell that way.
I will. If you point this way if I start yelling, please. We are wired, we are designed to be creatures of vision. That's one of our primary senses. Our sense of smell is dick. Our sense of taste is crap. Our sense of hearing is... We rely almost entirely on our vision. When I say to you a word, pardon me, you tend to form a picture in your mind of that word. If I say, for example, the word potato, somewhere in this gray mush, a picture of potato has formed. That's how our cognizance works. Pardon me, my voice is very dry. So, if you just describe things, you're going to kind of just hit us with a wall of words. John was a 6 1/2 foot tall wolf morph with blazing yellow eyes. Oh, for God's sake. How many furry stories start out that way? All of them. Sorry, most of them. You do not have to go into this exposition. People think, oh, I have to describe the character. You can, without just vomiting a bunch of words at me. How can you do that? By using context. I don't have to know in that paragraph that John is a 6 1/2 foot tall wolf morph with blazing yellow eyes. But I can introduce the character, and I can give clues to the reader as part of the story. How his companion heard him coming because she heard his claws clicking on the linoleum. And you can describe when she looked into the darkness, she didn't see him, but she saw his eyes like 2 candle flames looking at her. And how tall is he? Doesn't matter how the fuck many times he went through that doorway, he always forgot to duck and always hit his goddamn head on this thing. I never told you how tall he is. I never told you he had blazing yellow eyes. I never told you he was a wolf. But obviously he's tall. Obviously his eyes are very blazy. There's something not human about him if he's got claws. You see what I'm saying? You can introduce your character bit by bit. This is a little, years past, I actually used to teach long ago. It's a little take-home thing. Don't turn it into me. I ain't gonna grade it. I'm busy tonight. I ain't paid for this shit. But something for yourself. Take a page. I always say page because, when you had a piece of paper and you typed on it, and then on Microsoft Word, what they call a page in 12-point font. Write me a page. Sorry, write a page. In that page, tell me the character's species, the character's job, and a good idea of the character's appearance. Without using the name of the species, without using the name of the job, and without using any words to describe, like color or height. This is something you can try on your own. Take it home, try it. I gave this talk about 3 years ago at an unnamed convention in another state. And a young fellow came up to me and he said, I wrote a story. Could you read it for me? And I always cringe inwardly because it's either going to blow my socks off or it's going to blow my mind. And I'll let you decide which one is which. I looked at the story, I gave this talk, I opened it up. Jeff was a 6 1/2 foot tall German Shepherd morph who was wearing a police uniform and sitting in a police cruiser. He said, what's wrong? I said, you've done all the work for me. Don't try to put the picture in your head into my head. Give me enough information that I can form the picture myself. Doesn't have to be the same picture. It just has to be close. He didn't understand that, so I said, may I rewrite your story for you? At least the opening. He said, yes. I said, can I change the name of your character? He said, yes. I said, okay. We need to convey that we have a German Shepherd who is a police officer sitting in a police car. How about this? And I wrote this down because I was very proud of myself. Klaus rolled down the window of the squad car and asked the nearest punk for a light. He received it from shaking hands. They were always such perfect little angels once they saw the teeth. Now think about that collection of words. Klaus, something German. Squad car, he's obviously a cop. If he's in a squad car, do I have to tell you he's wearing a police uniform? No, he probably is. And there's something about his appearance that even the most hardened greaser is just going to become a little choir boy as soon as he sees those teeth. This is what I mean by show, don't tell. You can use other senses. I just spend a lot of time telling you how visual we are. But we have other senses too. Don't ignore them. Stephen King wrote a story about a satanic dry cleaning machine that comes to life and starts eating people. It's Stephen King. He can make that work. Okay, right? Stephen King? Okay. But this is a piece of machinery that comes to life. And he used a spectacular description that I love. I kept this with me. That, yeah, obviously this thing is coming for them. It's Stephen King. It's a small town in Maine, probably. And this thing is outside. And the door bursts open and the air is filled with the smell of thunderstorms. What's in your head right now? You all know that smell, right? Ozone, electricity. Throw in little things like that evoke smell, that evoke hearing, that evoke the sense of touch. There's bullshit under it. It's going to bother me. Very OCD. Don't be afraid to use those scents. Don't overuse them. Does everybody here have a thesaurus? Do you have a thesaurus? Good, throw it away. Throw the damn thing away. Because the thesaurus is a great tool if you know what all those words already mean. It's a tool. It's not your answer. Here's another little exercise I like to do with students writing. It's something I call the color of words. I don't think anybody else ever described it this way. The English language, on one hand, is crap. On the other hand, is amazing in its flexibility. Its almost infinite capacity to change meaning by just a subtle change in a single word. The way an artist can take a palette with the primary colors of paint on it and mix them in exactly the right proportions to give any color in the universe that the artist wants. You can do the same with words. And by changing a single word, you can paint an entirely different picture without going into lengthy description that's boring. You have a character. Character is in a situation and is in a mood. Got that? There's a situation and your character is reacting to the situation. You can describe the situation, you can describe the reaction, how the character's feeling, what his blood pressure is, what his pulse is, he's starting to sweat, blah, blah, blah. Or you can use that color palette and change a single word in what might seem an unrelated sense. Remember I said we're visual creatures. I'm going to take a simple sentence. A simple sentence, the act of moving from this direction into that direction. I'm going from here to the air wall. And look at how the different words can completely change the scene. He walked to the air wall. He crept to the air wall. He shuffled to the air wall. He slunk to the air wall. He staggered to the air wall. He stumbled to the air wall. He ran to the air wall. He dashed to the air wall. He perambulated to the air wall. That's the guy with the thesaurus. Watch out for that thing. Throw it away. But you see what I mean? Just with that single word, I've told you everything you need to know. That the character is slinking. He's edging. He's tiptoeing. You now have the imagined picture. You know the scenario. You know his mood. I don't have to tell you. By the way, these are all hints. These are all tools. And this is not the be-all and end-all. It's still up to you to write your story. Where was I? I lost my place. Excuse me. Oh, right. what's his name? Herman Melville. Remember him? Herman Melville. Remember I mentioned the great author who said every word in that story should point to the climax, that story arc? If you have something that deviates from that arc, you're taking your character out of the flow. Taking your character out of the movie, if you will. Who here has read Moby Dick? Thank you, one person. Thank you, two people. Here's an assignment. Go to a old-fashioned bookstore and for 50 cents buy a used copy of Moby Dick. I want you, well, okay, let's review Moby Dick, okay? We start, call me Ishmael. Ishmael is obviously a whaler because he is on his way to Nantucket. He's going to stay in the Spouter Inn. And he stayed, think of it, the Spouter Inn, right? What other job could he have? He's carrying this harpoon, just in case you couldn't tell. And because this is the 19th century, he doesn't get a nice plush, bonvoy room on the club floor. He gets a bed, which he has to share with, and please forgive me, in Melva's language, the savage Queequeg, who is a Pacific Islander. When Ishmael wakes up, Queequeg is hugging him. There's some things about Melville scholars have been discussing for a long time, so all right? And then they go down to the docks because they're good friends now, because when you wake up and the savage is hugging you, you're best friends, right? Excuse me. They go down to the docks, and there is the Pequod, the black ship. Odd. Very, very dark compared to all the other vessels. The Pequod is black. And this crazy old guy comes up, Isaiah, and he says, "Hey, yonder is Ahab. He will rise and beckon, and all save one will be lost." And Queequeg says to Ishmael, "Dude, don't look him in the eye. He's crazy. He's a meth addict. Just keep walking." Okay? In the 19th century, that's pretty much what he was saying. And then they look up on deck, and there indeed is Ahab. He looks just like Gregory Peck. And he's up there with his one leg, and he's saying, the best boys took the strawberry. Wait, the wrong person. No, it's the white whale, yes. Moby Dick, he bit my leg off, and I'm going to fuck him up because I am Captain Ahab. Gregory Peck, what say ye, men? Okay, you're now at page 95. Go to the next page. Flip to page 191, rip it all out, and throw it away. Because what follows is almost 90 pages of infinite description of how to load cargo into a 19th century whaling vessel. It goes into the minutest detail where every single barrel goes, why the water is placed on this side and why the salt tack has to be up here, and make sure that the grog is here, but only in portions because it's fucking boring! Rip that out! You're left with Moby Dick the pamphlet. That is gratuitous nonsense. It's not necessary to the point of the story. I think Melville was getting a little drunk because he was a whaler himself. So he's just going through my typical day. I'm going to load the vessel. Yeah. Speaking of gratuitous nonsense, I want you all to repeat after me. Repeat after me. Sex is a plot device, not a plot.
Sex is a plot device, not a plot.
Thank you. You wrote this really steamy, hot sex scene. It makes you all hot. I'm going to put this in my story. If it doesn't contribute to the story, get the hell out. Get rid of it. It's going to ruin your story. It's distracting your viewer, your reader, from the movie in the reader's mind. James Bond, biggest offender in the world. James Bond, okay, here we got Sean Connery, Bond, James Bond. Oh, we got the car chase, and Dr. No, and the guy with the gat, there's chasing at, and there's missiles, and over Transylvania said, yeah, wait, and then we're back to the missiles, and well, wait, what was that? That's where you go and get the popcorn. Because you know you got 7 3/4 minutes of wait to go get popcorn. What's it for? Nothing! It's one of the problems with the Bond films. Okay, from a literary standpoint, the fact that they objectify women and treat them in a very, very poor fashion, a product of the 60s, but does not excuse the... Sorry, that's another soapbox. I don't like Ian Fleming, he's a dick. Or was, he's dead. Picture this. Picture this. The end of Moby Dick. If you haven't read the book, have you seen the movie at least? You know, the whale, after the Pequod has been stove in, and the men are clinging to the wreckage, and all of a sudden the whale breaches, and literally clinging to the old ropes wrapped around his scarred hide is Captain Ahab. And he grabs a broken harpoon and shouts above the din, the roar of the ocean, from hell's black heart, I stab at thee! For hate's sake, I spit my last breath at thee! I just can't quit you, Moby Dick.
Maybe pound the wall a little less hard, because that light was having an aneurysm.
So I have video of you breaking the hotel.
Okay, do you see how that kind of changed this whole scene? You know, you got a sex scene, that's one for you. You want to write porn? Write porn. Don't try to put it in literature. Take that scene out, put it aside, show it to your friends, put it on for affinity. There are some times when the sex scene is necessary. I hope at this point I am not giving any spoilers. Terminator. Please tell me you've all seen the movie Terminator. The sex scenes, okay, those of you who've seen it, the sex scene's necessary, right?
Yeah.
Because without that sex scene, which at the time seems gratuitous, the ending of the movie doesn't make sense. So it's perfect. The director, who was overly horny, wanted to have a nookie scene. He said, let's make it part of the plot. I'm okay with that. I have this right here. Sex is a plot device, not the plot. Can easily be gratuitous, parenthesis, Melville, close parenthesis. Okay, I'm kind of belaboring this point, but this is the most important part of your story. You are now spinning the yarn. You've got your opening. You've hooked the reader. You are now drawing them into the narrative as it builds and builds, keeping their attention, giving them the information they need without just laying it out for them. Using your reader's imagination. Your reader is imaginative, believe me. Letting them create the images. Now you come to the climax, and you come to the denouement, which is what they call it in French, and in English they call it... Exactly, because why come up with a new word when you have a perfectly good one? Actually, that's what English is all about, isn't it? Sorry, moving right along. Now you need to end the story. Sometimes that's the hardest part. People always ask me questions like, is it okay to end the story with... Don't ask that question. There is no okay, there is no not okay. If the story benefits from your ending and leaves the reader wanting more, then you've done it right. If it leaves the reader satisfied, there is no formula. There is only one single formula. It is not necessary to tie up every loose end. There is no need to take every single unanswered question and in the last 10 minutes answer that question, Mr. Lucas. I want to get him into a room with just me and a set of nunchucks for 3 minutes. And I will tell him how to tell a fucking story. Sorry, got a little off my notes. The ending of the story. Sometimes the climax and the ending can be the same thing. You rise that and boom! And the deep and dank tarn at my feet closed sullenly and silently over the fragments of the house of Usher. What more needs to be said after that? Is that not pretty much the end of the story? I like Poe. Has anybody here ever read The Telltale Heart? Probably the most fantastic ending that anyone has ever written. We have this guy who's created the perfect crime. He didn't like his roommate because his roommate had a weird eye. So he kills him. And he cuts his body apart. There's no blood because he did it in a tub. A tub had caught on. And he buries the pieces of the body under the floorboards of the house. And he puts them back in place so skillfully no one can tell. And there's a knock at the door. When he opens the door, the police are there. We heard a scream. What's going on? Oh, it was a dream. I had a nightmare. I've been plagued by them. Don't you have a roommate, an old man? Yes, he left for Europe. He's on a 4-week excursion in Europe. He told me he'd be back, at the end of the summer. He left 3 days ago. Why didn't you guys come in? Because he's so proud of himself, he committed the perfect crime. With that hubris, he invites the cops in, sets them down right next to the spot, serves them brandy, and starts telling stories. And they're having a good time. The cops are partying with the guy. 19th century was different for cops. And he's going on and telling something about effective writing and everything. And he's going on, and the cops are just laughing. And he's and this noise is getting louder and louder.
Maybe not too loud though.
It's got a hangover. So do I. You don't see me bitching about it. Anyway, he's hearing this sound, and he realizes it's the heartbeat of his victim, somehow still alive. The heart is beating under the floorboards, and it's reverberating. The whole room is shaking. He can feel it in his chest. Remember I said, use the senses. Feels it here. And the cops are just sitting there with their brandy, smiling at him. And he says, they have to hear. They must hear it. How could they not hear? They must. And he realizes, they're dicking with me. They know it. They know they can hear it, and they are making mockery of my suffering. Finally, he just blows up, scatters everything off the table, which I'm not going to do. He shouts, villains! Dissemble no more! I admit the deed. There! Tear up the planks! It's the beating of his hideous heart! Now, do we need to go into great detail about the trial and everything that goes on after that? No. That's all you need to know about the end of that story. A man done in by his own guilt. I need to steel myself for what's coming. Excuse me. Who here has ever read Hemingway? Oh, thank God. Were you forced to read it, or did you do it? Okay, who here has ever read Hemingway of their own volition? Not one of you, because you are all sane. Ernest Hemingway was the worst piece of filth ever to crawl out of the Caribbean Sea. I'm going to read a passage from For Whom the Bell Tolls. I was made to read this in 8th grade and write a report on it on my cuneiform tablet. It's about Robert Jordan. And I know it's about Robert Jordan because that's all they ever call him. It's not Bob, it's not Robbie, it's not Mr. Jordan, it's not Hey Bob, it's Robert Jordan. Robert Jordan woke up in Robert Jordan's tent and got out of Robert Jordan's sleeping bag and went to the door of Robert Jordan's tent and looked down and saw Robert Jordan's friends. And his friend said, Robert Jordan, how are you? And Robert Jordan said, Robert Jordan is fine. What shall we do today, Robert Jordan's friends? Robert Jordan's fine. Oh, shut up! By the way, if you like bull testicles, read Hemingway. You know. For Whom the Bell Tolls, by Ernest Hemingway. For him, it was a dark passage which led to nowhere, then to nowhere, then again to nowhere, once again to nowhere, always and forever to nowhere, heavy on the elbows in the earth to nowhere, dark, never any end to nowhere, hung on all time, always to unknowing nowhere, this time and again for always to nowhere, now not to be born once again always and to nowhere, now beyond all bearing, up, up and up into nowhere, suddenly, scaldingly, holdingly all nowhere gone, and time absolutely still, and there they were both there. There they were both there. Time having stopped, and he felt the earth move out and away from under them. I loved you when I saw you today, and I loved you always, but I never saw you before. Just fucking kill me now! The fuck is this? I had to write a report! Excuse me. Anyway.
Well, they're at nowhere?
I went away for a moment, but I'm back now. That's Ernest Hemingway. But as my late granny used to say, sometimes even a blind chicken can find a piece of corn. Because the ending of For Whom the Bell Tolls, the only part of the book I like, Robert Jordan has been shot in both of Robert Jordan's legs. He is fighting with the communists in the Spanish Civil War against the fascists. This was a problem in the United States in the 50s, by the way. Who do we root for?
No one.
So, Robert Jordan is shot in both of Robert Jordan's legs. And Robert Jordan's friends are carrying Robert Jordan through the forest where Robert Jordan has been fighting the fascists who are now after Robert Jordan because he is known to be Robert Jordan, who is Robert Jordan, who, because he's Robert Jordan, is obviously Robert Jordan. And he's shot in both legs. And I mentioned he's shot in both of Robert Jordan's legs. Not anybody else's legs, just Robert Jordan's legs. Robert Jordan's. And he says to Robert Jordan's friends, just leave Robert Jordan here. Robert Jordan is just slowing you down. So leave Robert Jordan here with Robert Jordan's rifle and just enough bullets for Robert Jordan to cover your retreat. And his friends say, but Robert Jordan, he says, look, just fucking call me Bob. They say, no, we must call you Robert Jordan. It goes on for 18 pages with this. So they leave Robert Jordan in the forest, and Robert Jordan is lying on Robert Jordan's stomach. And Robert Jordan brings Robert Jordan's rifle up to Robert Jordan's eye. Through the mist, Robert Jordan can see the fascist soldiers beginning to emerge. The last line of the book. He felt his heart beating against the pine needle floor of the forest. Once more. He felt his heart beating against the pine needle floor of the forest. For once in his life, Hemingway has brought you into the story. You can feel that, right? Tense moment. You feel your heart beating. Pine needles, the smell. Remember I said use the other senses? I don't think he wrote that. I think he passed out in his typewriter, sloppy alcoholic that he was, and his 9-year-old niece came in and said, oh, Poppy's drunk again. Let's see here. Oh, no, let me just fix that for her. I know that's what happened. So now, I have your story. It's a tale that involves the fact that your character is furry. That is an integral part of the story. You have a good beginning. You've built the narrative. You have kept the reader's interest. You have built that story arc like climbing the roller coaster hill. Remember? You have used your reader's own imagination. You haven't just described stuff. You've given the reader enough information to create the images in the reader's head. You've used the color of words. You have hit the climax and then the, thank you, the denouement. Now you are finished. What do? Send it to a friend. Not a good friend. Send it to a friend that maybe you owe $50 to. Why? Don't go away, I need you.
Me?
No, the bird.
I am the bird.
Yes, you.
Okay. What you need?
I need you to illustrate a point.
All right.
Give it to a friend who's willing to tell you where you have messed up. I mentioned Kyle Gold. I've known him for longer than some of you have been alive. When I wrote Tweaked in the Head, which is a story about a bird of prey, specifically a red-tailed hawk, I might add, who is given through scientific means human intellect. Now, I know birds of prey, and I know that they are assholes. Present company excluded.
No, I'm an asshole.
So, if you give a bird of prey human intellect, you're not going to have, James Bond. You're going to have Ernest Borgnine. You're going to have this cigar-chomping, swearing, gambling, going to shit on your carpet creature.
Seems legit.
Yes, who's going to shit on your carpet just because it's your carpet? Why else? I need to shit on something. Is that yours? I'm going to shit on it. No, don't. Please don't. I'm just to illustrative purposes. So, that's what I wanted to point out. So, I sent this story to Kyle, and he wrote back, great story, but the ending sucks. You need to change it. I said, but I like the ending. He said, okay, pay attention. I had a story where I have a protagonist, the person where all the crap happens to. And crap happens to him all throughout the story. And at the end, more crap happened to him in the end. There has to be some sort of change in your characters. Without it, you have what we call the wooden character, the cardboard cutout character. Something has to happen to change your character in order to keep it interesting. My character spent the entire story getting shit on. I had two sentences.
Would you like to build a personal?
Two sentences at the end
Make another?
to finally give this character the chance to do something right for himself and for the world. All I had to do was change the name, who was doing stuff. And that completely changed the end. Finally, this character that you were so sympathetic to, where all the shit happens to, at this point, finally just smashes the figurative bottle on the table and says, okay, fuck it. Which is what the story needed. And I needed Kyle to tell that to me because I thought I had the best ending in the world. I mentioned Mr. Lucas. Let's go back to the original Star Wars. The first movie of the trilogy. the Star Wars trilogy, of which there were 3 movies. We all agree on this fact. There were 3 Star Wars movies. We're talking about the first movie of the trilogy, aren't we?
Yes.
Thank you. The first movie of the trilogy.
The only ones that counted.
Thank you. We have a wonderfully developed character in Luke Skywalker, who starts out the film as a whiny bitch. And at the end of the film, he's a whiny bitch who's now a Jedi. Okay, oversimplification. But look at how Luke Skywalker is forced to grow up, forced to mature, forced to change. Look at Han Solo. How Solo goes from being, you know, the roguish, I don't give a damn about anything, to the roguish, I want to boink the princess. Actually, that's pretty accurate now that I think about it. Anyway, those are fantastic characters in terms of character development. That's what we call character development. The character changes, is affected by the incidents around the character. As much as everybody loves him in the original movie of the trilogy, Darth Vader is the worst character. Because he starts out as an evil, black-clad, cloaked villain, and he ends the movie as the evil, black-clad, cloaked villain. Nothing about the character changes. He's the same from the opening scene as he is at the end. Now, over the course of the trilogy, at the end of the third and final movie, finally he gets his chance to change. Remember that little special effects scene? Before Lucas said, oh, I have to tie everything up. Sorry. So I did that. I made that simple change. And it went from a crappy story to a publishable story. So you have your story, show it to somebody who is willing to give you honest feedback. Don't give it to your mom. If you want someone to tell you, oh, what a nice story, yeah, give it to your mom. She'll put it on the refrigerator. If you want somebody to look at your story and say, okay, good idea, but blah, 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 this needs fixing, find that person. Because you will not develop, you will not progress, you will not learn as a writer without someone to tell you what you've done wrong. And I'm going to emphasize that. As a writer, as an artist, as a creator, don't fall in love with your character and have such a thin skin so that if somebody complains about what you wrote, you're going to throw your arms up and say, I'll never write again. Good, don't. But if you want to learn, you want to progress, you want to become better, give it to somebody who is going to criticize the work. Because the person is not there to hurt you. The person is there to say, I'm liking your story, I would like it better if. Any questions? I've either completely covered the material perfectly, or you are all completely floored by my amazing delivery. Or my breath has knocked you all out.
That too.
Why, thank you for supporting that theory. That was not what I was looking for, but I seem to have finished on time. If there are no further questions. And by the way, that is a scientific code. When a scientist says, if there are no further questions, it means, we're done, I'm tired, I want to go to the bar, so don't say anything else. If there are no further questions, then thank you very much for your very, very kind attention, and I hope if there's even a tiniest little thing that you've learned, then I have done my job. Thank you very much. What am I doing next? They've got me.
The bar.
What? Well, actually, maybe not. Okay. I gotta shut up. Not right now, but in general, because I tell convention organizers, I'm still reasonably young and very energetic. You can go ahead and schedule me for any...
Thank you.
Oh, what time is it? I actually have a little bit of time off. So we can go to the bar, but I don't have to go to the bar. What I do have to do is go outside and get some more snow. We're done. Good job. Yes. And these are mine. And hopefully I've not encroached on the next thing in this room.
Silver Gato Man, he bought me a coffee. Silver Gato Man, here is the song for thee. He likes to video all the panels at the cons. You should go and watch them whether they are short or long. Silver Gato Man, you video that's not a jibe. All of you go to his YouTube channel and like and subscribe.